the time he got all done. And I can see the frustration. The longer it takes, the longer that clock ticks, and the bigger the bill gets. And you know, the engineer's fee is going to surpass the work again if we don't hurry up and make a decision and get this done.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to come back to the communications item on the agenda. That's number 6. I just want to make one little note tonight. As we're all becoming more comfortable now in council meetings and so on, and to start respecting the time and following Robert's Rules of Order and so on, I would like to kind of touch on, we haven't applied this strictly up until now. During the question period, you're free to ask as many questions as you like. Once we get into debates on the motion, once a motion's on the floor, the rules are that everybody gets 2 shots to debate the issue, and up to 5 minutes apiece on each one. So obviously there's going to always be exceptions to that, and you know, the chair can rule on those, but just in the interest of us moving things along, we're going to try to stick to that. Okay, so first one is communications. We have several items of correspondence pertaining to the backyard chickens. I believe we have a staff report with the draft bylaws that are anticipated to come forward in March. So we won't spend too much time on this issue right now. I just would like a motion to receive the backyard chickens as information. Do I have a mover? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Rabbits. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next is the Grand River Conservation Authority budget requirements. Any discussion on the Grand River correspondence? No? May I have a motion to receive that as information? Councillor Rabbits, seconded by Councillor Geisens. All those in favor? All right, moving on to the approval of minutes. Council minutes from January 15th, 2019. Are there any errors or omissions in the January 15th, 2019 council minutes? Okay, seeing none, they are declared as adopted and signed by the mayor and clerk. On to reports of committees. A is council and committee open and closed minutes, January 22nd, 2019. Can I have a motion to approve the January 22nd CIC meetings with the exception of resolution number 5, which is pulled for further discussion? I have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Columbus. All those in favor? That's carried. Resolution number 5 is before us for discussion. Councillor Taylor, you requested it be pulled. If you could. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just, over the last week, a few things have come to light that I think we should discuss a little further before making a decision on this piece. One being that the company did own the land for 5 years, but the site plan didn't start until after 2 years of ownership, so the site plan did only take 3 years. It's still a long time, but as the Angus, what was it? Dr. Angus, what was his name? Who did the deputation? Just slipped. Bain, there we go. Bain said it took 5 years, and I think it is just important to make note that it took 3. As well as I noticed that the property is up for sale on realtor.ca. It was sent to me throughout the week by an individual, and I think it's important that if we are going to move forward talking about tax exemptions, we need to discuss amongst us if these are going to be transferable, if non-transferable, how we approach it, and I just think it's very important to get some more discussion on the topic.
Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And had Councillor Taylor not pulled the recommendation number 5, I would have. And I've had several communications from downtown Simcoe retailers about this situation too. And with respect to recommending the property tax break for a Queensway developer, one of them said just their, let alone not their property tax bill, but their BIA tax over and above their property tax was $952 per storefront. So that is significant. We have heard over and over the last many years regarding deterioration of the downtown business and commerce. talk about 30 empty stores in the downtown Simcoe. Also, the county initiated a downtown secondary plan to enhance business, and I know Councillor Rabbits and Councillor Taylor are on a committee to put some report together regarding revitalization, I believe it is, in concert with the BIA and the Chamber. And this property owner, the developer, they should have realized the underground development challenges before they actually proceeded to develop this property. And there's a real estate phrase called caveat emptor, where the buyer is supposed to know all that what the property has to offer if there's any challenges there. So this week, I noticed too, like Councillor Taylor, there was an ad on the Norfolk County website, actually, whereby this property was advertised for sale, market for $1,990,000. And the ad also stated, built-out tax incentives was part of the quote on the ad. So they've obviously included tax incentives that were generously given up so that this development could go forward. This property is certainly retail, and I don't think anybody has a problem with developing it as retail, but the issue is the fact that we're using the community incentive program to exempt some of the property taxes over 5 years, which could actually amount, if you calculate it all out, I would think it's several $100,000 is what it would amount to. And anyway, we have downtown merchants struggling in retail, and I just don't think it's the right thing to give them a tax break. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wonder if staff has an estimate of what the tax might be. I've heard from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands now, so I'm just wondering if someone can give us a little bit more clarification on that.
Mayor Chop, I'd be pleased to take a stab at that. I've been just in communication with Mr. Johnson's staff downstairs here this afternoon in anticipation of your question. We don't have something exactly like that in Norfolk County, so for all intents and purposes, we looked at other plazas and just extrapolating. So for the most part, if we assume that the taxes on that proposed development amount to $50,000 a year, you recall that year one, 100% of those taxes are rebated. Year two, 80, 60, 40, 20, 0. So by year 6, they pay full freight. That corresponding percentage reduction based on a $50,000 tax bill would amount to, as Councillor Columbus was here right in the middle, it's about $150,000. These are just rough figures. It would depend on impacts and the assessment and whatever would be billed out, but it is considerable for sure.
Councillor Rabbis?
Thank you, Mayor Chop, and through you to staff. I was wondering if it is portable. We've made an arrangement with an agent, and we've come to learn that they're thinking of selling the property potentially. And I was wondering if this is the tax incentive grant program, if it's portable, if it can be transferred between owners.
If I could jump in myself. So when I learned about the real estate ad, I believe that was rather presumptuous myself also, that would be transferable. And at that point, I was quite happy that we elected to include it as a separate document as opposed to forming part of the site plan control agreement. And I had a conversation, actually I emailed Mr. Loeb, and we've since spoken about it. And yes, we can draft a clause in there that would not allow that grant to be transferable to a new property owner. So it is what I would support myself as well, given the nature of it. I think 3 years is still, whether it's 3 or whether it's 5, I think that is an extremely long time to be in site plan control. I do think that we hear these challenges here in Norfolk all the time. I continue to maintain that. As far as, are we giving up 150,000? We're not giving up anything right now because there is no building. So if the project isn't developed, we're going to continue to earn, I believe, $9,900 a year on the property. So to say that we're giving up 150,000, we're giving up a lot more than that if the project doesn't come to fruition. So 150,000's, what did you say, 50,000 a year you're basing it on?
That's correct.
So if we don't get that going, every year we're losing 50,000 in my view into the future. As far as the downtown component, I sympathize completely. But at the same time, it is a property that is properly zoned. It is a property that has begun the process with Norfolk County, that has gone through site plan control. You know, nobody would rather not see Walmarts and so on in town than myself. However, the time to stop that has passed because this property is zoned for it correctly, and they have a legal right to develop their property. So, isn't it better that we get the development going, that we start getting that tax revenue even faster, and then every year after that, we start putting another 50,000 in our pockets, than leaving the land sit vacant and not do anything? You know, as always, it brings other peripheral benefits too, more jobs and so on here. So that's my position. I would support, certainly, that we, you know, draft a clause in the agreement, as discussed with Mr. Loeb, that would prevent the grant from being transferable. It is this property owner that has suffered a hardship as a result of the delays and so on, and hopefully they will develop the project in Norfolk and use that to their advantage. That would be if somebody else wants to. So if that is the case, obviously Mr. Loeb will be bringing the agreement back to council for approval then. So he is under that understanding now. I don't even think that we would need a motion for that. But we can if you would like to propose that or something else.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. No, that'll be all, and I would support the recommendation that you have presented to write that in. I think direction is enough to staff, and we're looking forward to a report and further debate and a decision at that point in time. So I don't think a motion is in order myself, but maybe we have other councillors that differ in opinion.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I wonder rather if a motion is in order just based on the fact that we have had the community members reach out to us with displeasure and concern in regards to this, in which case we could just, in an effort to make this more official and move forward with it.
What if I just add that? Yes. Okay. How about this? That council accept the grant proposal as presented on page 11 of the agenda package, and that county staff be directed to include a clause in the agreement prohibiting the transferability of the tax grant.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Are you making a motion?
I'm just reading a proposed
Okay.
motion.
I was getting confused because did you pass the chair earlier?
No, I'm just reading one that if somebody wants to
from
move-
earlier when you were speaking. So I was just confused as to where the
I
discussion
haven't
was
passed
going.
the chair at all.
Okay.
Councillor Van Passen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was looking at the original motion, and you know, staff be directed to work with the deputation respecting the property tax increment grant. And you know, you did explain one of the other comments I was going to make, like as long as that facility is not there, we're not collecting any taxes. So we're not really giving them money. We're just not taking all of what we potentially could. And the longer it takes, the less we're ever going to get. But direction to staff would be enough just with the existing motion, I believe. You don't, like, we just direct staff to make sure that that is a clause that in that agreement that they're going to work with, right? So, but if, yeah.
I'm fine with that too. If somebody wants to put the motion on the floor.
If the clerk's suggesting we include it, there's no problem in adding it in, and I could make
And as
that
I said,
motion.
Mr. Loeb's going to bring it back to council. So
Yeah.
the only reason that I read this was because the clerk prepared a sample that nobody has, and that was going to address that problem. So unfortunately, Councilor Martin has started a motion, so I don't know if there's no seconder then, correct? Then we could dispose of it. Would anybody like to second the motion? You want to second the motion? Okay. So the motion then, I will read it, that council accept the grant proposal as presented on page 11 of the agenda, and that county staff be directed to include a clause in the agreement preventing the transferability of the tax incentive grant. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, next. All right, I lost my spot here. Okay, on to the Recreational Facilities Advisory Board from January the 14th, 2019. Are there any discussions on the RFAB minutes? Can I have a motion to receive the minutes as information? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Rabbits. All those in favor? Councillor Martin? Okay. Next is the Norfolk Environmental Advisory Committee meeting minutes, December 10th. Okay, actually, it's just been passed another motion here. Again, I'm just reading the motion passed by the clerk. That council extend the current civilian memberships of the Recreation Advisory Facilities Board to expire January 14th, 2020, and that council authorize the Recreation Advisory Facilities Board to form working groups with specific functions such as developing a working plan and project timelines, and further that the vacant citizen position be advertised. Would somebody like to move that? Councillor Rabbit, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Discussion? Councillor Columbus?
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Cridlin where we are with the advertising process. I know it says advertised, but we had a lot of interest from outside already without advertising.
Through Madam Chair to Councillor Columbus, I may defer to Andy Grizel, being a committee of clerks. He looks after the advertising for us.
Through you, Mayor Chop, I believe we've received either 2 or 3 unsolicited applications immediately. Previously, there was a lot of interest in this the last time we opened it up, just in the spring and summer of this year. So I don't anticipate it'll take too long. I'd suggest that we go and advertise it for a period of 2 weeks. So we'll get that ad out very quickly after tonight and advertise for 2 weeks, and we should have a good selection of people for council to consider.
Is your concern the cost, Councillor Columbus, or?
I've had people inquire whether we were still taking applications.
So at the RFAB committee, just to give you a little bit of background, there is a pool that had existed previously, but we felt it would be, given the large number of applications that have come forward since there's a new council, that it would be prudent again to advertise this position to give those people a chance. So again, that was moved by Councillor Rabbits, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? That's carried. Next is the Norfolk Environmental Advisory Committee meeting minutes from December 10th, 2018. Any discussion? I have a motion to receive the minutes as information. Councillor Michele, seconded by Councillor Rabbits. All those in favor? That's carried. First staff report is open session, Norplex Hub project update. CAO 19-05. Mr. Cridlin, could you please present the report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, to County Council, before I start, this report was written by the CAO, however, I will be presenting, and with that said, staff from all county divisions have had input into this report as well as this project. So at the end, when we open up for questions, I may not have every question, but as I look around the room, that we have enough staff here to cover all bases. So with that said, I will be brief. The purpose of the report is basically a summary for this new council, and also just we're asking, giving it as information and looking for council's take forward steps. Being an 11-page report, I think I can break it down fairly easily. The first 4 pages are just a summary overview of motions, resolutions, and basically how we got to this point today. So I won't spend a lot of time on those resolutions. Then if we get to page 5 of the report, cost estimates of existing county facilities. I think this is something I need to talk a little bit about on. On page 5 of the report, we'll start with the Adult Community Center, or the Simcoe Senior Center here at 89 Pond Street. This was part of the original report as well. This building is 200 years old, is a home of our Simcoe seniors, 550 members and growing. And with the building being so old, there are all kinds of problems with the building for accessibilities and any growth or move forward in there. All reports submitted up to this time have basically said that the senior center should not, the present building should not be part of the seniors going forward for many reasons. The latest report from the consultant on this building is that over the next 2 decades, approximately $2.5 million will need to be spent to keep this building, as well as they're looking at some immediate costs for 2019 at almost $1 million. And that is pretty well the number we've talked about for this building. $3 million has been thrown. There, okay. The next facility is the Simcoe Recreational Center, home of the Annalise Aquatic Center as well. And the latest consultant had said on this building here that, again, approximately $2.2 million to be spent in the next 2 decades, and 2019 approximately $76,000. One thing that the consultant did not look at were the pool itself. And staff have previous information and reports that show the pool is close to 50 years old. When it was first designed, it was designed for approximately 100 bathers a day. And now we are routinely at over 300 bathers a day. So with that, you run into some problems with turnover of your water chemistry. I think the swimmers have packed council chambers a few times with complaints about warming the water up for the warm water yoga, then coming back to the swim team. Just too many people in too small a pool. Obviously, the other part of this here is a therapy pool. The age demographics in Norfolk we all are aging, and therapy pools are a great thing to have for your community, for people as we age, or even for accident victims and stuff to rehabilitate. So with that, added to the $2.2 million over the next 20 years, we are looking at to rebuild the pool in site. You're probably looking at around $9 million. It's a bit of an issue because Norfolk County owns the building but does not own any other land. So if you were to build a pool and a therapy pool outside, you're probably looking at closer to 12 to 13, upwards of maybe $15 million. So we'll keep these numbers in mind, and I'll do a summary at the end. The next building on the list is Talbot Gardens. And I guess what I'd like to say in Talbot Gardens, when I saw the newspaper coverage or the social media on this building, that it's in good shape, what it talks about is the envelope of the building. I know last year there was, I believe it was $100,000 for a roof we put on, which we'd previously discussed, as well as a boiler was needed. But the cost that, again, this consultant didn't take into play, or it wasn't asked for, in fairness, was the rink, the floor, the ice floor are 2 old floors. We do have a problem with the header trench in the heating tube. So there also is a standard after a ice rink floor reaches 25, 30 years old, which this one is, it's past that, you do need to replace that infrastructure. Replacing that infrastructure is at the same time you replace your rink boards, and the numbers on that are $1 million, or what we're hearing around. This one may be a little more because of the 2 floors, depending what kind of boards you put in. The other thing that may come up with this is when the first report came out in 2017, days before we brought the report to council, we had some destructive testing done on the seating in the building, and it's the concrete underneath of the seats we found were faulty, and that we have the previous report here, anywhere from $700,000 to almost $2 million to replace that. So that was a number we used as well. What staff have been able to do since then is we have filled the void under the bleachers. We have added grout, and in certain areas we weren't able to do that, so we have wooden beams and posts holding it up. So what we've did is we've bought the bleacher section time while we figure out what we're going to do. We still have to have the engineer in every couple of years to do reassessments on this. And the other item where staff originally had a $600,000 budget item to replace the red seats, and they came from the early 70s, I believe. When they did the work in the 90s, the seats were carried over. So a lot of the problems with the seats are we can't get parts or pieces. Accessibility is tough for folks to get in. So what he came up here with the number of, again, $2.5 million in the next 20 years. I think what we need to add to that is the million plus for the floor and the boards, and we still have to keep in mind that the concrete sections are, I won't say Band-Aid up, they're safe, but we still have to have people come back in. A fourth building that is not mentioned in this report that I think I will bring to council's attention, as I'm just giving you background information, is the office at 95 Culver Street was included in the first couple reports. I've had a few councillors through. I hope I did my best to show them that we are fairly crowded. Most important there, if I had to pick, it would be our EMS staff. We have storage rooms, joint bathrooms. We have staff working almost in broom closets. So they do have a budget item in future 10-year capital looking for a new headquarters. So part of this first came together that if we could get some of the CSD staff out of 95 Culver Street, EMS could expand, saving the money also to build a brand new facility. So I'll just leave the four buildings there and just recap it as the way we got to this point is we had 3 or 4 buildings that staff recognized as needing work. And at that time, we also had a 2015 master plan, Parks Recreational Master Plan done. And they had mentioned the possibility of looking at a multi-use facility. It got very interesting when I did that math for you. There's at least 15 million. We could argue more, we could argue less, but I've always did the traveling road shows on about 15 million in the next decade and a half. And when we were looking at provincial and federal funding at 33%, you know, the math is Norfolk would pay 15, which we're going to pay anyways. If the feds came in for 15 and the province came in for 15, we could have a multi-use facility and not actually spend any more money of Norfolk County. So then I'll move on, still on page 7 here. Schedule of risk assessments, inspections. This is part of the county's contract for general insurance and risk management. They have scheduled 28 facility risk inspections in 2019, and all of the buildings we talk about, I'm not sure if Culver Street is in there, will be included this year, so they will come through and do an inspection as of for risk management. That may change these numbers, it may not, but it's a factor I think council has to keep in mind. Another thing as we moved our way through was the demolition cost. The previous council had always said if we do have to demolition these present sites, if we can't repurpose them, we did have that looked at as well. So that is on page 8 of the report. Basically, the senior center is about $248,000 if we did demo. Talbot Gardens would be $306,000 if we demoed, and the Simcoe Recreation Center $290,000. Again, just background information for councillors. Staff have been on 3-4 tours of facilities. They are listed there, and I think what staff came across, the next line there is staff advice on changes and mandates. These are things that we had learned from these facilities tours that you know, daycare providers weren't in our original plan. Obviously, there's a need for that in Norfolk, as the report talks about. A number of these facilities do have daycare included. Also, a community kitchen and or commercial kitchen were quite a bit of an interest to the other groups. We think in Norfolk, especially with the Fanshawe College and some of their culinary courses, that would be a good fit. Multi-purpose meeting rooms for the community were another important thing, and also potential for corporate customer service kiosks where you could come, full-service kiosk, pay your taxes, that sort of thing, seem to be a theme as well. I'm almost finished here. We need to touch on partnerships. There was some talk earlier, too, about partnering perhaps with the Y. We have had conversations with the YMCA, and at this point, until we get a better plan of what we're doing, the Y isn't that interested. They'd like to be at the lead of these. They like to be into design of the buildings, that sort of thing. And until Norfolk County can tell them exactly what we want to have, talks are kind of on hold. On the other section, Fanshawe College has been approached. Obviously, if we can get a therapy pool with some of their programming in the kitchen, they're very interested. They were also interested in partnering with some proposals, report writing, that sort of thing. So great interest there. And lastly, I'll talk about the establishment of the Norfolk County Recreational Facilities Advisory Board, which I think was a great prelude having the last minutes. The group has met, and there are some changes proposed, scopes changed. So, I mean, this group is alive and well and moving forward with a lot of positive changes. And I believe with that, I will quit talking and turn over to Norfolk County Council to any questions they may have.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Martin. Oh, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Chop, and thank you, Mr. Cridlin. You just gave more information than I could have ever expected. That was absolutely wonderful, and I'm sure you know that I followed this project very closely. So I was quite shocked when I opened this report and essentially took home that the costs for replacements and repairs were lower than ever anticipated, lower than I had ever saw before over the year following this project. And I just wanted to say that you essentially answered a lot of my questions there. This report also doesn't speak to efficiencies of a new facility, the deficits that these current facilities really regularly run at. The pool's kind of neglected in the report here. Talbot Street is essentially reflected as being in good health, when we know that there's at least $3 million additional dollars that need to be put into that facility. And the county has put money away in anticipation to repairs along the way. So as the media sits here today, I really would hope that they hear that Talbot is not in good health, that the county does have money put away, and that we can add, essentially expect at least $15 million in repairs to our facilities, and that we think of that as we move forward. And I really liked the aspects included about the partnerships, about childcare and whatnot. So finally, my question would be, could you please just confirm for me that we are looking at about $15 million overall as a rough estimate in repairing our infrastructure?
Through Madam Chair to the Councillor, the numbers can get us to 15 million. It depends on what the direction from council is, because obviously if we don't add a therapy pool and we just do repairs to the present pool, it's a bit of a floating target. But if we look at the 10-year capital and a previous report we had on Talbot, again, 13 to 15 in the next decade and a half are very, very reasonable numbers to expect to spend.
Thank you. Councillor Huffman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you too, staff. Mr. Crilly, just to reiterate from my colleague's perspective, I agree with all of the points that she made. I think that there was a lot of discussion in the community in the past week or so that was of detriment to the movement of the community hub. It seems to be that every time we try and take 2 steps forward, we end up 3 steps back based on misinformation, and I was as well, when I read what was in the media, was a little confused as well. And then going through this report and then hearing the rest of it, I mean, the pool was a pretty big component. And not only, as Councillor Martin had spoken about being involved from the beginning of this process, there's also been a lot of talk that it's not just dollars and cents, it's community, it's engagement, it's, trying to maintain youth in our community, recruit people to come to our community, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for all of that detail. I did just want to add, though, the point is, I think in the report there's a piece in there about the demolition of this current senior center, and that does need to be removed in any kind of numbers because that is a designated heritage building. So I don't believe that we can demolish that. Is that correct?
Yeah. Through Madam Mayor, I'm thinking I've got the right answer here. I believe Norfolk County, if council, if they decide, can delist that, deregister that, and the building could be, I don't know how we get to that point. Mr. Baird, obviously from his past, maybe can answer, but I believe there is a trigger for council to do that if they wish to.
Okay, I just wanted to, I know that's been brought to all of our attention this week,
It
so I just
presently is,
wanted to
correct.
clarify. Okay, thank you.
I think there's developers that would probably be really interested in developing that building as it is once it's sold. Councillor Van Passen, then Councillor Taylor, or Rabbit, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did have some questions about the numbers in the report because I went through the capital budget that we had just been looking at, and yeah, in 2023 we have $5 million for the senior center. 2022 we got $11 million for the rec center, and Talbot, the floorboards and the floor and the boards is $2.5 million. But you explained part of that as like that's if looking at buying land to replace the senior center somewhere else. That would be the difference in cost from the numbers in the report, or?
Through Madam Chair. No, that is correct. The seniors, we've always talked $3 million, and every report leads to $2 to $3 million to rebuild that building. And I think when we look at accessibility and the growth of that group, and you know, down the road, the potential of development on that, we added another few $1 million to actually purchase a piece of property, to have it serviced. That, you know, again, it's tough to know if it's going to take $5 million because you don't know where you're going, what land's going to be worth, and what you're going to need. So again, 10-year capital is only good as our educated guess at the time. So that's the difference between the 3 here and the 5 that's in the capital budget.
Councillor Rabbit.
Thank you, Mayor Chop, and through the chair to Mr. Crittlin. I had a few questions about potential recoveries from demolition. If we were to move forward with demolishing the various buildings that we have in front of us here, I was wondering what we could expect in terms of recovering, say, energy-efficient windows, LED lighting, doors, HVAC units. It shows the cost, but I was very interested in what we could potentially reuse if we were to choose one of these, say, locations for a recreational facility, if there would be an ability for us to repurpose any of the construction materials or any of the aspects of the building and, say, maybe incorporate that into the new building that we would be constructing. Would that be an option?
Through Madam Chair, the councillor. At this point, yes, I mean, it would be an option depending on where we go. I'm back to the operational costs. Obviously, new windows, doors, lighting, and things like that they're much more energy efficient than when you're dealing with a 60-year-old building or a 200-year-old building. And back to the whole hub multi-use purpose thing, operating costs generally we find go down about 30% in a new building versus old. But I think your question was more like if you were to use some of these buildings to repurpose them. Yeah, anything we can, any green technology, and there's a million things on the market, stuff, proper building things, would save that. I just don't have a number on that because we're not sure where we're going, how large spot you're talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Crittlin, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to make the point that, you know, we've invested some money into Band-Aid solutions for some of these buildings. We may very well be able to recoup some of those investment costs if we can move those investments to a new recreational facility. It's not necessarily sunk costs that we've put into some of these buildings. We've renovated them with new materials, and some of these materials could be repurposed. I had a second question, and I think it's more appropriate maybe to direct this question to fellow council. I would like to actually have some heritage comments back on some of these buildings if we are contemplating demolishing them. I think there are interdepartmental implications, and maybe even our heritage advisory boards that we have got up and running would be a great party to parlay with to see if they had any recommendations with regards to the heritage designations. And that's just a general comment. I'd be very interested if Councillor Micheli would maybe even be willing to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Rabbits. That's a question that came up at a very recent Norfolk Heritage Committee meeting on which I am the council ex officio representative. They are very concerned about these topics, and they did have a fair bit of discussion surrounding several heritage properties in Norfolk County, and the senior senator that Mr. Cridlin spoke about is one of them. And I think that just as a small, perhaps recommendation, maybe a question I could ask Mr. Cridlin is, I think that some kind of contact and regular, communication with those, both of the heritage committees that we have in Norfolk would be beneficial, I believe, to everybody. Thank you.
I think we're underestimating the development industry with that building. I mean, it's mint. I can't imagine anybody wanting to tear it down. Any further? Councillor Van Passen.
Yeah, to Councillor Rabbit's comments, generally when you look at a demolition contract, the people who are going to bid on that, they will take into account what they can salvage and they adjust the price accordingly. Now, if you want to start salvaging, they would charge a lot more to take it apart nicely and then give it back to you, but they will take it apart nicely and sell those extra pieces to other facilities and build that into lowering the price in the first place. So to try to save it yourself is usually not a functional way to do it. So.
I think the one piece here, I mean, I have so much faith in the new committee and the engineers that we have on that committee that are volunteering their time and so on. So, I think that moving forward, we're looking at kind of pressing a reset button here on the hub back to the beginning and letting them provide direction and expanding on the calculations that have already been done and so on. So any further discussion? Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I do have a motion prepared as it relates to the hub, but I think that it's, after speaking with our clerk, that it's something that I will leave until after council finishes up with a little bit more information pertaining to the hub later on this afternoon.
It's entirely up to you. We do have the closed session report. We could deal with that later in the agenda. We could deal with that right now. It's up to council what they desires to do. It's all just information for the purposes of council, so it's not like there's anything. If we go into closed session, it's mostly just to answer questions that you might have.
So council's all received the closed session report. The one motion that we didn't make as part of the RFAB the minutes was the motion, I believe we were going to make a motion, or whether it was just direction to Mr. Loeb to prepare a non-disclosure agreement for the new board members to sign. Did we need to do that as a motion?
Mr. Loeb's over there. I think the motion that Councillor Martin has proposed, it doesn't have that wording in it specifically, but it does have them reviewing the site. So I think it goes without saying that we need to do that, but I don't know if Mr. Loeb might want specific direction.
Okay, so.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, through you, Madam Mayor. I think your description was correct. Presuming the motion goes forward, I think that would just be incidental staff work, and because I like to get ahead of things, I actually have the template prepared currently, so it won't take much more work regardless.
Perfect. So maybe just a general discussion here amongst councillors. We have the closed session report. You all have a copy. We are going to have all of our board members sign a non-disclosure agreement, so they will also receive that report as well. Would it be prudent to perhaps not proceed with that closed session today and to distribute that report to, once they've signed their NDA agreement, all the board, we could reopen that discussion at our next RFAB meeting then? Any thoughts? Councillor Rabbits?
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I have some questions that I would like to ask in closed session as it does pertain to the site selection specifically. I think it'd be more than prudent for us to entertain the motion and get a decision there, and maybe that'll even inform what questions we're asking in closed session. Maybe it could actually speed up our closed session, and we know we might have some information that we were going to ask, or maybe we're waiting for the results of your motion or our RFAB. And I think getting the motion out of the way, so to speak, might be in order. And again, there is some closed session questions I would like to ask.
I haven't actually seen the motion myself, but just from conversations, my understanding was the idea behind it was to increase the level of transparency with the other board members, because originally we had talked about inviting them today with the closed session, so that it might be prudent to engage them in that component right from the beginning, rather than meeting without, just because we were taking a reset and we were talking about kind of, including them perhaps more on that site selection piece than obviously was happening in the past, so,
If it assists council, those are the closed session, if council does want to go into closed session now, but I do also have the wording of Councillor Martin's proposed motion that I could read out. I have 20 copies on my desk downstairs that I can run down on the break and grab, but if you want to proceed with the motion now, I can just read it out loud for everybody. Sure. Whereas previous council directed staff to commence work on the application for funding for from both the Ontario government and the Government of Canada for a multi-generational multi-use center of excellence to replace the 4 facilities in Simcoe that are aging and in dire need of repair. And whereas previous council established a Recreation Facilities Advisory Board, RFAB, and the current council on December 18th, 2018 has amended the RFAB membership to include the mayor as ex officio and 4 members of council, and whereas this new council wishes to be open and transparent on all issues to the greatest extent possible, and whereas RFAB is scheduled to meet in February and it's council's desire that those meetings occur under the amended terms of reference, therefore it be resolved that council directs staff to halt all activity directed by the previous term of council in relation to the Norplex Hub project, as RFAB and the 2018-2022 term of council will review and provide new direction to staff, and that the following expanded mandate of the Recreation Facilities Advisory Board be approved. A, that the committee shall review the current site selection process and subsequent outcomes. B, revise as needed and apply the site selection process to the previously selected sites so as to be inclusive as possible and ensure there is fair rating systems in place that includes an economic benefits statement with each site. C, establish a current up-to-date 10-year estimate for repair, maintenance, and operations of the current 4 recreation facilities in Simcoe and develop a comparison estimate for new build containing just the same 4 facilities and apples-to-apples comparison. D, establish a fundraising program to supplement the previous donation from the Simcoe Lions and to receive further donations, issue charitable receipts, and identify major community partners to assist in the program. E, establish a community engagement program to liaise with core and major facility user groups and business professionals to address needs now and in the future. F, set up site visits in Southern Ontario that can serve as examples of efficient and effective community facilities. And G, assist staff in developing the business case and applications for funding of the Ontario and Canadian governments. And H, report monthly to council on progress.
Councillor Martin?
So I know that that is a mouthful. However, the intent was to be all-encompassing, and for our council members who are not a part of RFAB, all of that was discussed at our RFAB meeting, with the exception of including an economic benefit strategy when looking at lands, and additionally an up-to-date comparison from staff after reading this report and then hearing those figures from Mr. Cridlin, which I knew he was able to deliver today. I thought it would be very helpful for us to have an up-to-date comparison on repairs and replacements and whatnot. So those are the 2 amendments that I made. All the other items were discussed in our RFAB meeting.
Okay. I have a seconder for Councillor Michelli. Discussions on the motion. Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you, Mayor Chop, and through the chair to council, I will be supporting this motion. I think it is a great leap forward in terms of transparency and actually getting some rubber to hit the road on this project and involving our engineers and our RFAB members that are qualified to be informing this process. They were having their comments absent, and I think it's prudent for us to include them in the site selection process. I also want to acknowledge this is going to give our RFAB the ability to actually meet in closed session and review each and every site, and again, hit the reset button on this and actually start from ground zero. So while this is a great move towards transparency, I do want to acknowledge that it is going to allow our RFAB to meet in closed session and to have much the same conversations that we would typically be having as a council behind closed doors, including our civilian complement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rabbits. Any further discussion? Councillor Columbus?
Yeah, there's a lot of material in that motion, and I just wonder, Mr. Clerk, if that should not have gone through a notice of motion.
Through you, Mayor Chop, it is lengthy, but there's no determination on length. So the issue of through staff bringing forward the Norplex report, it is rightfully before council.
Because it would have been nice to have a copy to study.
Andy printed them out. He
Right,
just
but
said he forgot them
we're
downstairs.
in the meeting, and here we're passing this motion, and I haven't seen it. I can comprehend some of it. There's a lot of material in there.
Could Councillor
And
Columbus
I'd sooner
maybe-
have the in-camera session first and then deal with it. Thank you.
Okay, I believe we had a seconder for the motion, so we're going to have further discussion on it, and we're going to vote on the motion because it's on the floor. Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The portion of the motion regarding economic benefit statements, I'm just wondering if that is specific enough to staff, if you would like a little more direction in that, or if that's getting the message across. Thank you.
Worship. Again, probably, I believe it is. I mean, these were all part of this whole concept too, was economic spin-offs, that sort of thing with this. So I think we've got the theme of it, and we don't have to go forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Columbus?
I would make a motion to defer this item until we get further information in our hands, so we can
Okay, all
study it.
those in, any discussion on the deferral? All those in favor of the deferral? That's defeated. Councillor Van Passen?
I don't necessarily want to defer it, but if it's not too much trouble and the clerk has the copies downstairs, could he run down and get them so I can
You
actually
bet, no
look at?
that's no
'cause
problem.
There's A, B, C, D, E, F, is that?
Councillor Rabbits.
And
Again, it
maybe
was a
if he-
repetition of the motions that we passed earlier as well from RFAB. There are a number of us that sit on the committee. Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you, Mayor Chop, and through the chair, to the chair, I think it might be prudent. We do have in attendance tonight Paul Anderson, who is the chair of RFAB, and maybe it'd be good for Paul maybe to respond to the motion if he would be willing to do so. I don't know if that is in order, but I happen to see him sitting in the audience, and we've just the intent of this is to open this up for more public consultation. We have our chair happens to be in attendance. Maybe he would like to respond if he so chooses.
So I think that's, the clerk's probably going to slap my wrist when he comes back if I do this, but I believe, there we go.
They would give up your gym membership if we keep sending you back and forth.
So I'm going to halt proceedings here for a couple minutes so everybody has a chance to read. little break in procedure here. So Councillor Rabbits, if you would like to make a motion to allow the chair of the RFAB committee to speak, we could, if we had a seconder, obviously that would require a supermajority right now, but we could break in procedure here and allow Mr. Anderson to speak.
Thank you, Mayor Chop, and through the chair, I would like to make a motion to allow for Paul Anderson to speak, if he so chooses, breaking with the procedural bylaw, in order to get some feedback from what is before us for consideration.
Okay, we got a seconder, Councillor Martin, all those in favor? It's carried. Mr. Anderson.
Madam Mayor and Council, thank you. I guess Councillor Martin's motion kind of was born of our first meeting of our RFAB board and our strong desire to ensure this entire project goes through efficiently and quickly as well. So everybody on the board is highly motivated to see this project go through. And we're all extremely interested in making sure that we hit the requirements Norfolk County needs in the budget that Norfolk County can afford. So to that end, I'm not going to bore anybody with any more time, but requirements and making sure we come up with a good design may take precedence over choosing a site. So we started thinking about this from an engineer's perspective. And we started thinking, if we choose a site first, we're very limited into what we can then do with it. If we come up with a list of requirements first, then we can help select a site in a very transparent method. So that's where we're trying to come from, getting involved in the closed session business. And I hope everybody understands that, and we're all more than willing to sign NDAs in order to do this. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so Councillor's motion for deferral was defeated. We're back to the original motion. Any further discussion? Councillor Van Passen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to ask whether it's normal process when you're setting up something that basically is new. Do you have to identify where the funding would come from? Or does the original funding, like I think they set aside the $200,000 a couple of years ago to sort of look into this? Does that just carry through, or do we have to mention that in this motion?
Sorry, could you ask that question just maybe a little differently?
To go and look at things, study things that are going to cost money, do we have to identify where that money is going to come from?
I don't think we can. I think that's been discussed many times. I don't think we really can identify where all the money's coming from until we come up with some sort of...
Just for the work that we're going to do according to this report, right? Because I noticed in the other report, the previous council had set aside $200,000 budget that they've spent $59,600 with an additional $13,000. So is that the method? Like if they're going to tour facilities, that's going to cost money, right? So
We just approved, well, in the budget we approved, remember, we actually even reduced the RFAB budget, but we did keep 5,000, I believe it was there for those very activities. So that's where that money is coming from.
Right.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. So it's 5 minutes to 5. Does anybody need a quick washroom break? Because then we're going to start the public meetings back to the drainage. So right at 5 o'clock, we'll be back here for everybody that's been waiting.
On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario's south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here